Hello class, let's go over quoting. If you don't quote correctly, you might plagiarize. You already know that you need to enclose the quoted passages inside quotation marks. Now let's take it to the next level. Lead up to the quote with an explanation to tie it to your point. When quoting, students often assume that it's obvious why they chose that quote. Not true. It's not obvious to the reader. Here's an example. Suppose you're writing a report about President Obama's book, The Audacity of Hope, and you want to analyze Chapter 7 where he discusses race. These are Obama's optimistic final words. America is big enough to accommodate all their dreams. But if you just dump a quote in your paragraph, it's not nearly as clear as if you carefully lead into the quote to tie it to your point. Notice how the quote just appears after the sentence. It floats all by itself. This is poor. Blending is always better because it shows the relationship between your idea and the idea of the source. Acknowledging the newcomers who speak different languages, Obama concludes, America is big enough to accommodate all their dreams. On to number 2. Use a signal phrase. Notice in this example, 2 words were added to the quote. This is a signal phrase, and it helps blend in the quote. The signal phrase can go at the end of a quote too. Or it can break up a long quote, the way this one does when placed in the middle of the quote. Signal phrases can tell us the author's attitude towards the topic. There are many possibilities. Check your textbook for other examples. Third, when working with sources, don't quote often. If you try to patch together an entire essay of quotes, the paper will have too many different styles. It also signals that maybe you've been lazy or didn't really understand what the author said. So when should you quote? Generally, you'll use a combination of primary and secondary sources. You should quote more from the primary sources. What are these? I mean stories, novels, letters, manuscripts, interviews, field research, statistics. Primary sources may be printed, like this novel, or they may be electronic, images, films, or other media. Secondary sources are sources about sources. They explain, interpret, analyze, critique, or report information that usually comes from primary sources. Secondary sources can be books, or sometimes journal articles. They can also be electronic. Literary criticism is an example of a secondary source. Use more summary and paraphrase, and quote less when using secondary sources. Fourth, make your quotes count. Use only a few of the best quotes. Sometimes the author's language is especially graceful or powerful. Sometimes you want to discuss the author's choice of words. Those are good times to quote. Back to quoting guidelines. Step number 5. Keep your quotes short. If the quoted passages are long, just use what you need. Short quotes are easier for you to blend and easier for readers to follow. Let's look at this example. The original or primary source reads, "We can insist to those already here that with citizenship come obligations to a common language, common loyalties, a common purpose, a common destiny." Just use the highlighted part of the long quote. We can insist that with citizenship come obligations, asserts Obama. By using just the most essential parts, you can be concise. The flavor of the author's style is preserved, and so is your style. The 3 dots, or ellipses, let the reader know that you omitted unnecessary words. Notice that you don't need ellipses at the beginning of the shortened quote, only the middle or end. Just don't change the meaning, and don't do it too often because it adds clutter. Generally, all words and punctuation in your quotes must match the source, but sometimes you need to make a change. By enclosing the change in square brackets, you can change capitalization. You can change an unclear pronoun by substituting the noun. You can also change a verb to avoid awkward or poor grammar. When quoting poetry, you need to insert a slash to show where the line ends on the page. Quick review now. Tie the quote to your point. Use a signal phrase. Don't quote secondary sources often. Use only the best quotes. Keep quotes short. That's all for now. Feel free to ask for help after class or during your instructor's office hours. You can use a quality website such as the Purdue University OWL or visit our free tutors at the Academic Success Center.